We're going to call the meeting to order. We're going to call the meeting to order at 6:06 p.m. Ron and I have just confirmed that we have 5 boards, quorum of 5 boards present, and we have 17 WSESU voting members present. The only other one we're expecting is from Richard from Putney. That will make it 18. So I need, the first order of business is an approval of minutes of May 23rd.
I move approval of minutes of May 23rd.
Thank you, Ruth. A second?
I will second that.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome, dear.
Any discussion?
That was spelling it good.
No discussion? Okay. Ruth Barton has made the motion. Mark Truhan has made the second. All those in favor of the minutes of May 23rd as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions?
I abstain the vote.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute, we've got to
Right,
go.
so Ann, Michael, and Aaron.
I abstain as well.
Wait a minute, there's more. Amy, can you
Yep. So Ann Beekman is abstaining, Michael McGillian is abstaining, Beth Bristol is abstaining, and Eric Findell is abstaining. Did I get everybody? And it's mostly because you guys were absent, and Mike, you were, and Mike Hebert, and you were not present. That was the reason why. Okay. Thank you. Any communications? No? Okay. Just to give you a feel for how things are going to go tonight, we, because we are spending, surprisingly, we will spend more time on something else than Act 46 tonight. So we are going to be talking about the superintendent search. We're going to, the Finance Committee has reviewed and approved the warrants. So we'll go through those, get the approval on those, and then Alice can speak briefly about Act 46, give us an update, and then Frank is going to hand out a fiscal 18 budget timeline for us. Says we're getting ready to start that process, and then we'll delve into the superintendent search items. With respect to that, Russ Janis is the chair of the SU Finance Committee, which has been leading the superintendent search. He is going to make some comments and provide some background information, which you've already received in the email from Barb Nowakowski from Central Office. But just to review those specific items, and then we're going to touch on the culture of growth, that particular mindset, and then we would open up to public comment. Depending on the number of people that want to make public comment, we might have to limit it. We will make sure that everybody gets the opportunity to speak. And then we will go into executive session, and the intent there is to invite other school board members who are present to join executive committee, along with representatives from the individual focus groups and SU staff, specifically Paul and Marissa and Frank Bretner. So, and then we would come out of executive session and then take possible action on the recommendation of the committee. So that's the way it's going to work tonight. So we will move on to warrants. Russ, would you like to speak to us about the warrants?
Sure.
Okay.
I think I can do this. If there are no objections, I'd like to waive the reading of all the individual warrants. There are, hearing no objections.
I object.
Do you? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So on May 11th, 2016, there are warrants 1131 through 1136, except for 1135, totaling $353,011.87. Is that enough specificity as I or do you want me to read
I'm
it?
actually curious as to what they're for. I mean, I
Oh.
emailed.
Oh, I'm sorry, Michael is new to the
Oh, I'm
Demerson
sorry.
board, so maybe you can explain to him and remind the rest of us how this all works.
Sure, warrants, I mean, there are other things, but the warrants, checks are written for contractors, for employees, those sorts of things. And then we get a summary of those, and then we,
Actually, it's the other way around.
The Supervisory Union Finance Committee.
this is the supervisory finance.
Right.
So you don't see the supervisory finance committee, so that's one member from each of the 5 boards, 6 boards, the 5 towns in BUHS. And so we review item by item. It's probably very similar. I imagine it's the same as you see on the boards,
Sure.
on each of the individual boards. So it's grouped by or it's grouped, I guess, by check, but then different topics, throughout. And then we vote to ratify those expenses. And there are questions that come up, that type of thing. And so we've gone through all of these on these going 2.5 pages from May through September, through this past month. We go through those and ask questions, and then we vote to approve those. And then we're asking here for you to ratify what the finance committee, including the representative from your board.
Michael?
My question was along the line of, I understand that that's the warrant process.
Oh, right.
You used the "we" a couple of times, and I'm just unclear as to which "we," if you're talking about you as when you're on the finance committee?
Yeah,
Yes.
these are
Or
the
the
finance.
board as a whole?
No,
I mean,
it's-
which body is taking the action?
Yeah, it's the finance committee that, the finance committee reviews them and signs off on them, and then we're asking the full board to ratify. For instance, the BUHS board, we're big enough, so there's the finance committee that does that, and then the whole board ratifies. Where the whole board doesn't look at all those, we could if we wanted to, and I imagine, if there are objections, we can hold off on that vote, and you could look at those warrants.
I would
They're
like to-
completely public records, all the warrants?
Mm-hmm.
So anybody can look at those. And so if you're uncomfortable, we can do a majority vote, or whatever the chair wants to do. Have I answered your questions?
Yes, and as tonight a voting member, I am uncomfortable with merely ratifying. I would like to look at them and to see what's in them, because when I do sit on a board, especially on a town school board, I get to look at what they are in advance.
Yeah.
And admittedly, a little bit late today, I did email the central office to ask, could I see a copy of them? And the response I got was essentially, no. The finance committee looks at the specifics of them, and then it gets distributed to this full board to simply ratify. And frankly, I'm kind of uncomfortable simply ratifying without knowing what it is that I'm ratifying.
I'll let the board chair just, we could roll this over to the next, unless there's some reason why we need to do it at this meeting, for auditing or anything like that.
No, the pattern has been that this board delegates this responsibility to the finance committee. The finance committee is representing every town in the supervisory union. The process is to approve the warrants since the last meeting. So the last meeting was May of this body, the supervisory union body. So that's the tradition, that this board assigns representatives from each town to the finance committee. The finance committee does what Russ just said, and then makes a recommendation to ratify at the subsequent supervisory union meeting.
So I understand I was on the Brattleboro town board for 8 or 9 years, and there weren't subcommittees, everybody did everything. BUHS committee is big, this board is even bigger, and so the finance committees were delegated going through it item by item, but again, they are open to that. So, I have, if you want to take a look at them, unless I mean, it could come up to a vote and you could be outvoted, but I don't care. I mean, whatever.
I would say if there's no pressing reason to approve it tonight,
Yeah.
Michael could get access
Sure.
to those, take a look at it for your
That'd be great.
information.
That'd be fine.
I mean, obviously, it's up to the body and the chair, but I mean, I would be more comfortable knowing what it is that I've been asked to
Sure.
ratify to have my town's board if I'm voting tonight. That's all.
And all the finance meetings are warned and are open and people can come to those as well. So, you know, in the future, if you want to come and see those, or I could come by central office and take a look at them too over time.
I guess I would take the consensus of the board. This has been a long-standing process for at least the 13-plus years I've done this. So I guess I should apologize to Michael for not explaining how, as another Dummerston board member, how this goes, how it works. But I'm comfortable doing what the board would like to do with matters of approving these warrants. So do we?
I'd like to add to that. I think it would be nice if we get them electronically on an individual board basis. I think the board members of the WSESU ought to be able to get it electronically as well, so that when we come to the meeting, if we choose to look at them, we ought to have the option to be able to do that. And I would like to do that.
What are you saying you get already then?
At the board level, the town board level, we get warrants sent to us electronically in advance so that we can see them.
We
So
don't do
have to
that.
spend, what's that?
We don't do that at Brattleboro.
I'm sure if you asked, you probably could.
I'm just commenting that we don't all do that. That's what
Okay,
we're
well,
saying.
so from my perspective, that's something that's done on an individual board level, so I'm sitting as a voting member of the WSESU representing Dummerston, and I think it would be a good practice. So we all don't have to do it, but if you push a button, they're sent to everybody, if people want to look at them, and we are ratifying them. It does seem kind of strange that you're ratifying what you haven't seen, but so my perspective is just that. It would be nice if we all got them electronically.
So does that process negate the need for a finance committee? I mean,
No.
that's sort of the whole function one of the main functions of the finance committee is to vet the.
Well, we've got to show up and actually do it.
Right.
Everybody else could have the choice of looking at it or not.
Yeah, okay.
And is that put any undue, I don't know how many warrants Dummerston has as opposed to Brattleboro, and if that's why Dummerston looks at it, or if it was.
Oh, no,
Dummerston committee.
this is just for the
I know,
SU.
but
So
I'm asking though if it's going to cause, for the SU level, if it's going to cause an undue amount of work on the central office. I don't know why we already do it differently at the board level.
Walter?
I mean, I've only been on the finance committee for like a month, but every time Frank sends me the warrants electronically, I just forward them to the board and say, take a look, if you have any questions.
That's a good idea.
So there is that option to take a look.
So they're already going out electronically?
Yeah, to the finance committee.
So maybe that may be a good solution, is to ask your, for those who want it, if Brattleboro wants to see it, ask Mark or whoever the representative is to forward it to the individual board members.
That'd be great.
And it is already electronically distributed, so it's not like extra scanning.
All right, so it sounds like we found a solution for that individual boards the finance committee representatives will forward on like Walter
Can I
does
read
for
these
Brennan.
3 pages of numbers anyways?
Yeah. And so that leaves the question of, do we want to proceed with these warrants, approval of them, or do we want to push them off? Ruth?
I move we table the warrants until the next meeting.
Okay.
Do we need to approve the payroll though?
Everything has been paid.
Okay.
Everything is out.
You just can't take it back.
Unless you're the California National.
All right, Ruth made the motion to table the approval of warrants until the next meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays or abstentions? Okay, we will table that to the next meeting. Act 46. Alice, do you want to give us a quick?
Sure. We have a meeting tomorrow night, and as I recall, there are 3 sort of large things we're talking about. The first is the Vernon timeline of the vote. The clerks received from the state the notification of Vernie's withdrawal from UHS District 6. They received that on October 7th. And so we are most likely going to propose to the committee that the vote would happen on, what, the 13th, Ron? Did you just leave it around December 13th, because that vote has to happen within 90 days, and the 90th day is January 6th. So obviously early January and late December are not good times to have a vote. So it looks like December 13th might be the best, if not the only option. So we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about Article 8, which is the makeup of what the board would, a new board would look like. We'll also be talking about communication with the public, how to expand on that, how to make our the WSESU website with a plethora of information, how to make it more easily digestible to folks who are going on to actually be able to learn about how they should vote. We'll also be touching on equity, which is a conversation we've been talking about since the very beginning of this process, but it keeps rearing its head because it's a very important discussion and realm, and the Vermont School Board Association just had a 2-day conference on it, so we'll be touching base on that. So that's where we're at.
Okay, thank you. And then tomorrow's meeting is at 6 o'clock in Putney, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
That was my question, thank you.
Yeah.
And what time?
6. They're usually at 6. Okay. Budget timeline. Frank?
Okay, I have a document. It's a single sheet document. Similar to last year, it simply identifies several of the stages of the budget development process for fiscal year 18. And it's in a chart format, as you see the document coming around. Single sheet. It's just identifying for each board some of the key dates. Certainly not all the dates, but some of the key dates. For example, when you look at line 17, board approval of the budget, this is what Ron and I have drafted as a preliminary recommendation, and it's trying to be synchronized with your usual board meeting cycles, and then also being sensitive to the print deadlines that I know you're all aware of for developing town reports, meeting the public information requirements of the statutes. Also identifies the warning requirements to stay within the 30 or 40-day window prior to the vote of the electorate. And then one other thing that I think you're aware of, but it also is a significant impact in terms of helping us understand tax impact, is on December 15th. That's when the law requires the Agency of Education to provide some of those critical statistics that go into the budget process. Probably the most significant one is equalized students. That statistic comes out on December 15th. There are several other indices that are part of the budget development process. So this is definitely draft, and we're looking for your feedback. If these dates seem to work for your boards, then we'll start scheduling. But if they don't, feel free to give us a call, send an email, and we'll revise.
Yeah, so as you look at number 14, draft budgets presented to school boards, we looked at your regular meeting schedule to plug in those dates, and then there's like 3 other dates that would tie into your typical meeting dates. Number 17, as Frank said, the budget approval, that would be December 15th for the SU. So that would be the next SU meeting. We may have another meeting before then, but that would be the meeting that the Finance Committee has reviewed the budget under number 11, 12, 13 in those areas. And then actually 4 areas, and then bring it to the SU board on December 15th. So those are the dates that we plugged in based on your regular board schedule. And as we have meetings, we can just confirm that as we go to different board meetings. Okay.
Dan?
So I don't know if I'm reading this correctly, but does this lay out that each town board gets one meeting with the budget?
It shows 3 meetings, so
Dummerston,
the first one is,
12, 13.
yeah. So the first one's on line 14, so 12-13 for Dummerston, and then again on 12-20 would be a second board review, and then a third would be January 10th, so that's line 14 and then line 16 and 17.
Okay. Seems like we used to start earlier, and we had more work sessions in the past, but maybe I'm not remembering correctly.
And boards can decide to schedule extra sessions. I mean, that's what we've done in the past. I don't know that we did it last year, but some boards have.
So I should use this as a, for Dummerston, I'm just going to focus on that, that's my lens. December 13th, that's the first look for us, so we wouldn't have anything before that. Is that correct?
That's the plan. Of course, the admin would meet with the principal in all of the buildings, talk about enrollment, talk about staffing levels, talk about different initiatives that are underway, and of course that's ongoing, and it's starting next week, right on through. So there's a month of revisiting the current plan and assumptions, and then looking ahead to the new year. But it's when it comes down to understanding how it affects the school property tax rates, there's really no information until after the 15th of December.
Right. So, sorry, I have one more follow-up. I won't use anybody else's time. Number 2, that says district level budget materials to principals, October 31st. Well, I understand that would be the earliest time we'd actually have. So we could work with our principals starting from that time going forward.
That's really
as a board.
staffs.
Yeah, that's going to be background information that typically Ron and I will provide to building principals around what are we hearing from the state agency, Secretary Holcomb, any guidance, if any, from tax commissioner. Sometimes they would have given us some sort of a document that says here's what the legislature is thinking based on trends around, could be the grand list, could be proposed legislation that wasn't finished the prior session. At this point, I don't actually have any updates, so I would be revisiting our assumptions from last year. But that is kind of a general overview of what we're hearing from various stakeholders.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you, Frank. We will move on to our next agenda item, which is the superintendent search. Russ,
I have materials for the public because,
Do you have us there?
just so people understand, the board members received all of these materials as part of their packet. These are some extra documents. And if any board members need some of this material, you didn't print it off, put your hand up and we'll come around.
I've got a bunch of them.
Jill will take that.
I'll make it Otherwise, I've read it. Oh, yeah, I read this just today, because I was reading along and suddenly it did not complete a sentence, and I was freaked out.
Your day was that boring that you had to read something.
Well, it was in the middle of it, and so I was reading, what is this?
So, are we good? Everybody's got the materials? So, Russ is the chair of the WSESU Finance Committee, which has been leading the search, and he had some comments from the search committee he was going to, and points to make. So, over to you, Russ.
Okay, thanks, Amy. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the process, how we came upon the process. We talked some about that at the last Finance Committee meeting where I know some of you were there as well. And then I think, if I got it right, is that then we open it up to other comments from the board and then to the public. And it's important to hear what everyone says, because then we go into executive session and start seeing if we can make decisions. So, at the outset, what I'd like to say is that there are two sides to the decisions in terms of process that we had to make. And most of what I've been hearing is about the opening up to an outside search as opposed to starting with an inside search. And what I'd like to say is that both sides are supported with logic, and both sides are also supported with passion. And I'm not sure that the board has heard a lot, the Finance Committee has heard a lot of the arguments for the internal, which is the approach that we took. And I'm hoping that tonight we can hear some of that, some of the passion as well as the logic there. And the fact that there are differing opinions and passionate opinions and supported by logic is good. I mean, these are not simple decisions. There are benefits to each approach, and the committee, I hope we did a good job in terms of weighing these things, and it's good and it shows that a system is functioning, that there are these arguments on both sides. And what I'd ask both sides to do, both those who think that the process was exactly what should have been done and those who think that the process was not a good process, is that at least you listen to hear what the other side says, and not to minimize the weight of what either side says. But then ultimately, the Finance Committee needed to make decisions along the way. And then tonight, the full SU board, representing 3 from every one of our member boards, will have to make these decisions as well. So getting the input is really important. We need input, and I think I'll demonstrate the input that we've gotten. Let me start by talking about characterizing what I think the benefits of going outside are and the benefits of doing an inside search are. And we've heard a lot about the benefits of going outside, spoken eloquently presented and with passion. And if I misstate this, I'm sure I will be corrected and you will fill me in and fill in the gaps. But as I see it, and as we saw it, because we had these discussions as well, is that ultimately I think everybody is looking for the best candidate for the position to replace Ron. And there are different ways of doing it. The people, I think, supporting, or the arguments, it's not the people, it's the arguments, they're real arguments, supporting the notion of an outside view is to get a broad look, to see who's there. If it's the internal candidate, let the internal candidate rise and rise to the top and move forward. Some of the other benefits that I've heard from in letters to the editor, in calls to me and emails to me, deal with looking for new ideas, looking for change, and those sorts of things. And those are all valid points. Those are all things to speak in favor those. There are some costs to going outside. And these sort of costs aren't persuasive in terms of that's why we shouldn't do it, but there are costs in terms of financial costs of advertising and maybe bringing in outside consultants, that sort of thing. There's the cost of staff time, of sorting through things and doing things. And this is a time where a lot of things are going on in the district, in the supervisory union. So there's a cost there as well. And if there is a very strong internal candidate, is it fair to external candidates to put them through that process? That said, if that was it, outside search, is the way to go. But then there are the benefits of the internal search, and I don't think we've described that well enough. And I'd like to take a few minutes to look at that. And it's been noted in a lot of different meetings that doing something, hiring or promoting from inside is a common practice. It's not the only practice, but it's often considered a best practice. It's a legitimate, good way to go at it. Again, it's not the only way to go at it, but it's not something out of the ordinary. And besides avoiding those costs, the reasons, some of the reasons for it, and this is where some of the passion comes in, and a lot of that is coming in through focus groups and those sorts of things when we've been in executive session. But there are at least a couple of points where I think are arguments for taking the process that we did. One is having somebody inside, you can sort of hit the ground running. There's not a lot of transition time, and connected with that is perhaps a higher likelihood of somebody staying at the job because they are familiar with what they're getting into, what boards are like, what towns are like, what the issues are that the schools are facing. And in one of the documents that are here, is here, I think it was in something that Amy and I wrote, talks about what the average, not life expectancy, but average tenure of a superintendent in Vermont is, which is 3 years. So every year, 30%, on average, 30% of supervisory union superintendents turn over. We've been really fortunate. Ron's been here, is this 14 years?
Super 50.
And then Ray before you was here a long time, and that's when I moved into town. We've been very, very lucky here. But there's a lot of turnover, and this is brought up in some discussions. Sort of adjusting. The first year is showing the superintendents where the bathrooms are. Well, it goes beyond that. I mean, it's going that who are the boards, who are the towns. You might think, I'm going to get the town. Dummerston, Putney, they're nearby, so they're the same, or are they different? I mean, what are the different challenges in the community, in the schools? Vernon, Guilford, Brattleboro. Brattleboro looks a lot different, but there's a lot that's the same with Brattleboro of other things. It takes time to learn those things. And those are critical skills to learn. Not that somebody from outside couldn't learn that, but the benefit of having somebody inside is that we can hit the ground running and don't need that amount of time. And particularly with all the issues that are floating around the supervisory union these days, with mandates from Montpelier and elsewhere, that's a consideration to take a look at that. It's important that process goes. And we not just sense, we heard a lot of anxiety and those sorts of things about in these times of change, of bringing somebody inside, what's going to happen, and just that uncertainty and not knowing. So that's a benefit of going internal first, of just we overcome at least that one hurdle. So the inside person knows the background, knows the issues, knows the obstacles, knows the opportunities that exist. So with that, the process that we started taking is that the finance committee thought that, internal process seems like a good thing, but let's check in with the board. And I think in one of these documents, mine may be stated a little differently, superintendent search process review, there are dates here of all the meetings that we had coming up until tonight. I don't think tonight's listed here. That there are over 30 meetings. Each board, each individual town board, the WHS board, were given at least 4 updates. Some in executive session, some in open session. In hindsight, I wish we had done maybe a few more executive sessions to fill the board members in on details so that they understood more of what the process was. But there was lots of opportunity to do that. And so when we made that decision to, let's start with the internal approach, we checked with all the boards, and we got basically a yes from all the boards. Some unqualified, yes, go for it. Others were qualified, saying, well, think about this. Will this serve this purpose? Will that serve that purpose? But all 6 boards said go with it. So that's when we start that internal process. So we did that. And again, there's that list of meetings. So one of the notions of the benefits of going inside is hitting the ground running and familiarity with what we have. And then on top of that is that notion of not just knowing what we have, but a feeling of confidence that things are working well. I don't know if this is where some of the disagreement on looking inside or outside comes from. The sense that we got, and unanimously from the finance committee in terms of going inside, was a vote that things are really going well in the union. Not that there's not differences of opinion, but there are a lot of things that we, the supervisory union, the schools within the supervisory union, are being recognized for. Again, in the 2-page or page and a half that's in your packet that Amy and I came up, speaks to a lot of those specifics. And the WSESU leadership topic list, I think, was just handed out now, talks about a lot of the specific programs that we're doing and the recognition that we're getting statewide and beyond for things. I mean, our belief, and anybody in the finance committee who thinks I'm speaking out of turn, is our belief is this is a really good, functional, not just functional, but innovative, supportive community of educators that we have. And we believe in collaborative leadership, in spreading things. And there's a feeling, and that feeling translates into actions. And we all feel, and regardless of inside, outside, everyone is here for the interest of the kids. We all have the same goal at heart. It's a question of how we go at it. So our belief was that the system is really good, and the system is based on a lot of knowledge and local knowledge of what's going on. So that let's go the internal approach. And we have a history of supporting, of training inside people. I think 4 of our principals, at least one here, was an inside hire. We have 4 principals who have been were teachers and took training and moved up. Some teachers who took training and became an assistant principal or elsewhere moved out of the system. So that's one thing about to think about to the degree we have qualified people in here is let's keep that talent here. So that's part of what's motivating us there as well. There's that 2-page article, and it's in the agenda too. I mean, I'm not going to go through in great detail about what the article says. There's the article. And Amy and I refer to it in our memo by Fullen and Quinn, the right drivers, actions for schools. And these are things that the committee looked at as well. It's not just a recognition that there's synergy there. It's not just that we're doing things well, and so let's just keep doing things well. One of the things that makes things go well is the notion that we are supportive of bringing people up from the inside and acknowledging that we've got a lot of talent here, and let's see what we have, and let's give them a first shot. And so it's a real vote of confidence and faith in the system, that the system's working well. And that was our belief, is that it was working well. So, there are benefits to both the processes, going outside, a broader look, and you can look at other people, other ideas that come in. And then there's the support of bringing it up, and I'm hoping that both here you'll hear other people talk about those reasons for taking the inside approach and why that was a good first step to take. And when we go into executive session, I imagine those conversations will continue. So I hope that you'll hear some of that coming from other mouths than just mine.
Can I just interject something?
Yeah.
The internal search too, when we went to the different focus groups, the feedback from them about the internal search process was positive. And they appreciated being part of that collaborative process. And it involved not just a handful of people, it involved 56 different people from various aspects of our community. And the community meaning WSESU within and the greater community, looking for talking with community partners. So I think it's important to note that the process was well received internally within WSESU as well as externally and welcomed.
No, and what I'd like to continue, I've sort of taken us through, okay, we decided to go inside, and then look at what the process, what Amy's talking about, what the process actually was when we decided to do that. And I think that's just as important to talk about. But one of the first forks was, do we do an internal search or not? And that decision was made. And at the finance committee meetings, we talked about those, about what are the benefits of going outside, what are the benefits of going inside, the costs and benefits of both. And we addressed, we looked at those issues and brought those up. And would it be better? Would it be easier? Act 46 in the background, and all sorts of things going on. Would it be better to have that sort of process? Those things were raised, and we talked about that. But when it came to voting, it was 6-0. Let's do the internal process first and see how that goes. It's not a lot. Let's do an internal process, and we will hire whoever we get from the internal process. That's just the start, but let's just start looking at the internal. Let's do that first. So that was a decision that was made, not in some absent thing, oh yeah, let's just do an internal process, for no reason. We spent time at meetings. You can see the number of meetings that the SU Finance Committee had, and then talking to all the boards and talking about that. So it was not a snap decision by any sense. But then once we did that, once we made that decision, then we set up this process, and it's just what Amy was talking about, where we set up the different focus groups, and again on the focus groups you can see the dates. Well, actually that one is, I guess it's towards the bottom. There's the dates of all the times that all the various school boards, individual school boards were updated, and then there were the focus groups. First of all, the representatives, and I should say, because I know this will come up, that after the internal process, came through, and it was circulated to all the administrators. It went broadly throughout. Much to our surprise, there was just one candidate who came forward. So that was another question of do we go forward with that or not. At that point, then we start thinking about, well, what's the candidate? And again, doing a reweighing of the costs and benefits. And given who the candidate was and the qualifications, and we also had an interview with the candidate, just the finance committee with the candidate, we thought, this candidate has real promise. Let's go forward with it. And let's go forward with not just the finance committee saying, oh, this looks like a promising candidate, let's bring it to the BUHS. This is the WSESU board. You know, let's take a look at that. And again, in part thinking about, you know, if it's a really strong candidate, the fairness to other people outside as well. So we went through this process and we set up 4 focus groups. There was the leadership team, which were all the principals, central office staff, and the EES, Deb Gass was there, and you know, and there were 2 members. You can see 2 members of the finance committee, the search committee went to these meetings and basically observed. But we could see what people were asking, what they were doing, and we got real feedback there. And Ron, by the way, was not present for the interview processes there. There was a group of teachers and staff, 27, 29 total in that group. I wasn't there. Word went out, you know, to the union, and I think it went. You said that it went to each of the school reps, what are they called? Building reps, and to recruit people there. Parents coming, I think, through principals, and so there was a big session there. A central office group, I wasn't at that, but Mark was at that one, where there were, again, different questions. And I think the basic questions, have those been circulated as well?
They have for the board members. I did not.
So the board members have seen what all the questions have been. And then there was a community service partners. And the parents was in that one. I'm sorry, it wasn't in it was teachers and staff was the other one. And there, a handful of nonprofit and government agencies that work with the school. The police chief was there, and then some parents were there, and another process going through that. And then after that, after the half hour, 45 minute of give and take there, then the candidate left the room, and then there was a process of discussion of that. And I found that really enlightening. And I've been involved in a lot of principal searches. This was so much fuller than that, and that we, instead of just getting a report, and tonight is sort of like what will happen is more like a principal search where I think reps from those focus groups will talk to the board and just get a report. But the finance committee, sat through those and got that. And then there was an anonymous evaluation of sort of 3, 2, 1 of what, excellent. I'm not sure what 3 is the highest, 1 is the lowest, and then a space for comments. And as we'll discuss in detail, I think all the board members have actually seen all the numbers and all the responses at this point in executive session, so they've all seen it. And given that we're going to be recommending, it's clear that they were outstanding, and they were really incredibly strong. And being in those sessions, you knew that they were real. And after the sessions, each session it wasn't really that surprising to see how it is. But it was I do slam for saying at the BUHS that it was an open process. It was a confidential process because you always want to protect the identity so that if things don't go well, that person has some viability and doesn't have that hanging over their head. So there's confidentiality, but it's hardly secret. in that, boards were updated, and then these focus groups were there. I mean, when Ron went through, I think you said that there were 2 teachers. I mean, it's a much different thing. So, but times are different, and so we really opened it up a lot. And somebody from the community group remember commenting about how they'd been around for a long time, and this was the first time they'd been invited to, they'd gone through superintendents and principals, and this is the first time that they'd been asked for their input. So we really wanted to see, we're doing this internal thing, we don't want to make a mistake, we want to make sure that if we go with an internal candidate, that the internal candidate is really good. Now, there's only one candidate. I've heard in writing and in talking to people, how can you tell the best if you haven't done a national search? Well, of course, there's the possibility there could be somebody else out there. And that's why in our first letter, our letter to the editor, we talked about at this stage of whether we recommend the internal candidate or not. It's not just is it a qualified candidate, but is the candidate so qualified that it really makes going outside not fair, not worth it, not just the candidate, but the other candidates out there. If we've got a really strong candidate, why do we go outside? Is it to please people that are objecting to the way we did it? Is it to sort of, put window dressing on it? Or is it, the reason to do it would be if we think that we can really get somebody better. And so there's a threshold. And it's a balancing. Nothing is yes, no, black, white. There are no obvious answers to any of these things. And that's why there are people on both sides of these issues. And our feeling was that this candidate was so strong, it would be a disservice and almost dishonest to open it up. And then, and so we're not the hiring committee. We're the screening committee. Tonight, I hope that we'll be able to act on that, where your representatives will look and discuss these things and make that decision of whether the candidate, and they'll have a chance to meet with the candidate, crosses that threshold where going outside doesn't seem worth it. I mean, there's always that potential for somebody out there, but how are you going to get there? That you can always do more and more and more of going outside, and so each step you have to I teach economics, so I'm always balancing the costs and the benefits of it. But it's a balancing test, and it's looking at what those decisions are. And so we reached that decision. And that wasn't something that was decided in advance. That was, let's see who we have and see what the candidate is like. And frankly, the candidate, exceeded my expectations. So that was the process. And it was, our minds were open looking at it. We brought in a lot of feedback to try to see what's there. So, based on all that input, we are making the recommendation to hire the internal candidate. There'll be, open discussion here, and I certainly want to hear what people say. And then there'll be discussions within the SU board. And I think that's where we take it. If I've forgotten something, if I've overstated something, understated something, I hope other members on both sides, fill in the gaps. Because I've tried to lay out what we've done and what our thinking was. And again, I hope that each side can understand what the other side is talking about. But then we've got the job of making that decision. Those decisions the Finance Committee made, and now it's up to the SU board. So thank you for attention. Thank you.
Mike, hang on just a minute. So I was going to ask the other Finance Committee members, which are Walter, Mark, myself, Eric, and Richard, if you had any particular points that you wanted to make, having, been part of the process.
I might just add one thing to add, and Russ has already said this in part, but just to emphasize, when we decided to do the internal search, to go with that way, one of the things that we talked extensively about was having a process that set the bar extraordinarily high. The idea was that what we could do with an internal candidate, the amount of time that the community members, staff members could spend with that candidate was higher than what you would normally have with an outside search, with somebody coming in and being able to get to know potential candidates. So one of the things, just to add to that part, is as we work through this process, the process that we put in place for the kinds of conversations that community members could have with the candidate were so much more significant than what we could have done with outside candidates. So that when we came to that point of making a decision about whether we do outside for comparison, especially as we heard some pushback about that, one of the things we also had to consider is what would we know about an outside candidate based on this process that would be comparable to what we've already done. And I think that was a big part of this, that what we put this particular candidate through was significantly more than what we would have put somebody on the outside through. And that we couldn't do that with folks on the outside because simply there's not time for that.
Anybody, any other finance committee members on this?
No, I'll just echo what Richard said. I think that was a big point for me when we were in that meeting, when we all made that decision, was that this process would be a process that was something that you wouldn't be able to do with an outside candidate. It's the decision that we made, and I think the process itself bore out that I think we all feel that we made the right decision based on the results of the search. So.
May I speak?
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Kelly. One of the things I observed, I was on 3 of the focus groups. Well, maybe on is not the proper word. I sat in on 3. I was a non-participant. I was an observer. One thing that I've noticed is that this is an internal process that can be looked at as the culmination and validation of a professional development program among the supervisory union teachers and administrative staff that was put into place long before we ever had to call upon it to look for a superintendent. This was a development program for the 23-year-old teacher who's coming into his or her first classroom and can say, I can grow up by taking advantage of the professional development afforded me by this supervisory union and someday be a superintendent. And that's exactly what we are facing right now. One of the groups came up with a tremendous one-sentence thought on this. It's growth from within as a philosophy represents a true investment in this community. The person is from this community. They have taken advantage and they have applied themselves to all of the opportunities for professional development within the profession and now find themselves in a position whereby they might actually be the next superintendent. No need to go to the outside. The process that we developed, or that was developed long before my tenure on this school board, and I've been here for 10 years, has borne fruit. It has produced an individual of outstanding talent and quality. Another thing that came up in one of Russ's letters, additionally, is deadlines and state mandates. And God knows, tomorrow we're going to go and beat Act 46 to death again. As mandates and possible transitions approach, having a candidate familiar with the local schools in the community and who could step into the position of superintendent quickly and smoothly is a real plus. I would say is without value. And it sort of, if not negates, it sort of makes the pro forma of going outside of the system superfluous, in my humble opinion. I think the internal process that was pursued was initiated a dozen of years ago, 15 years ago. It has actually worked. It's something that the school system put together, and it has given us the person that we will be looking at tonight. And I'm proud to be part of that system. Thank you.
Walter, did you have it? So, any other comments from Mr. Finance? Okay. Oop. I'm going to take Mike first because he, yeah.
All right, just a couple of comments, Russ. First of all, I don't think it's a matter of taking sides. I think, as you and I have spoken, it's imagery and what is felt out in the community. And I don't think we're taking sides. We represent our communities, and I think what we're going to try to do is bring forth what our communities feel about the process. And I don't think that's necessarily taking sides. It's not a statement of what's a good process, what's a bad process. It is a process that some people view as flawed, some people view very successful. But I think all the feelings about the process should be put forward. And I don't think it's a matter of taking sides.
Oh, absolutely. And if I can, if I can just respond to that, is that, I'm sorry if I gave that impression, I probably did use the word taking sides or this side of that. What I was saying is that there are good reasons to go outside. There are definitely good reasons to go outside, and there are good reasons to go inside, and it's a balancing. And so, I'm sorry if I gave that impression, you're absolutely right.
And secondly, you mentioned earlier about the longevity of our superintendents. I don't think it's a matter of luck. You said, look, I think it speaks to the abilities of our local boards, of our towns to group together and come up with a highly functional district that when a superintendent gets here, they're pleased to be here. We've had 3 superintendents in 4 years. One left because he died. One left because he got to be Commissioner of Education, and then Ron came in and he's been here for a long time, which I think speaks well for our whole district and how we operate. There are dysfunctional districts that can't keep superintendents, they can't keep principals, it's just constant turnover. So I think it's more this group and our predecessors that have made a very highly functional unit, and I think very successful. Another point, when we talk about internal searches, external searches, things like that, I was interested in the article, this growth of culture, where we talk about if you don't look within, you're kind of making a negative statement about the people that are within your unit. I think what you're doing is being as thorough as you possibly can. And had we done this 15 years ago, and I perceive Ron as a strong leader. I think he's done a very good job in his role as superintendent here. We wouldn't hire him. We'd hired someone internally. So I think, that speaks to a broader search. And the other thing that I had some difficulty with is you said several times that the boards were kept abreast. Well, I don't know what the other boards felt, but I know on our board, when we asked the question, how many people were interviewed, can't tell you. How many people applied, can't tell you. Well, is there anything you can tell us about the process? Absolutely not. And that, I think, adds to the general feeling within the community that this is a very closed process and not very transparent. So, and I think we had that discussion. I had that discussion with Frank. I don't have to belabor the point here, but I do think the imagery of the process was not good. Whether it was the right process or not is irrelevant. It's the imagery and what people perceive the process to be. And as you know, most people's perception is their reality. And I think the way this went, I think could make it difficult for the person stepping in because they're going to come in with the burden of, well, is this really the best person? So I think the process, had it been more open, may have been smoother. I'm not sure. That's it for now.
I don't know if I should respond or...
I would just like to respond to 2 points. One was that when Ron was being interviewed for the position of superintendent, there were no internal candidates. And then also...
Well, actually, there was, and he did make the cut.
Okay. Well,
So there was a process to consider that, and then you decided that person wouldn't be appropriate.
Well, it was a broad search, and somebody had applied.
so yes, and to his, yes, okay. And then I guess I'm uncomfortable with your point about having the boards take credit for the success of the district when I feel like really it's the people who work with the children in the actual buildings and in central office that are the ones. We can take credit for hiring good people, but I wouldn't want to take away from their work because...
I wasn't implying that they did a good job. It's the functionality of this body that keeps good leaders here. I have seen other districts that the boards are dysfunctional, they don't cooperate with one another. It's not far from here that you've had boards that the poor superintendent has 10 different contracts he has to deal with. This is a very good unit. We hire good people, We keep good people because of the commitment of the people that serve on these boards. It's not to take away from faculty or staff.
Yes.
It's to talk about what makes superintendents want to stay in a district. They will not stay in a district where they don't feel supported by boards. And they can have exemplary staff, but if they don't feel supported by boards, or their boards are always working against their purposes, they're not going to stay.
Yeah. I guess I just took your point differently. Yeah, so, because.
No, I'm not saying you should take credit for
Yeah.
Peg Maxfield's doing a good job, or his principal's doing a good job.
Yeah. Yeah.
We hire a superintendent, we employ principals so that they can supervise staff, help staff grow, and become all that they can be in their role as a principal, a teacher, an aide, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But the bottom line for retaining good superintendents is you have to have boards that are willing to cooperate with one another and cooperate with the superintendent. And throughout the state, you don't always see that.
Okay, Russ, you wanted to?
Yeah, I just responded to a few of your points. One is in terms of how we kept the boards apprised, and I thought that I said that, I regretted that we didn't go into executive session more often. As I look back, and the fact that we couldn't, and we talked about this, that we couldn't tell you in executive session that, yeah, there is just one candidate, but this is what we're doing. But that was sort of a double mistake in some sense, in terms of the perception that you're talking about. Because one, you didn't know what was going on. But then when your constituents, all of our constituents come up and talk, if you don't have information, they go, wow, I think, they're doing this because, the presidential candidates are driving us to do this. That's not true. You might go, I have no idea because they didn't answer that question. So, is there one candidate? I don't know. So we should have shared more in the board along the way to help that process. To say that we didn't tell you anything about the process is an overstatement, but I understand that feeling. And then you said, image is everything, process is nothing. Here's where I want you to listen, which is that, sure, I understand the image, but it could have been a really bad process. And so the bad image goes with the bad process. Process is important. And what I tried to put forward tonight was that the process that we took was a really good process. We didn't fill in the boards enough, and I get that. But the process in terms of vetting a candidate is really good. And then you talked about it's unfair to the candidate coming up. What I would ask each of you to do, you say, oh, people won't give this person, that's up to each individual. So I would ask you, I would ask anybody that feels that way, it's up to you. It's up to you to look at that candidate and see if they become superintendent, how well they do. Is the transition good? Are they making good decisions? Those types of things. And just to say, to sort of put it off, I'm not going to pay any attention because it was a bad process, and so I'm not going to give that person a chance. I'm sure there will be people that react that way, but I'd ask each of you to get over that, vent on the finance committee, but don't put that on the candidate. Let the candidate
I don't
rise
think
or
the
fall.
process was bad. I said I wasn't sure if it was good or bad.
I think you said the process was irrelevant.
I'm not sure I said that either, but we can look at the film later.
You want to take, yeah.
And I'll look at the tape.
Yeah.
But regardless of the process, if you look at the lack of information available to boards, to the public in general, the perception is that it's a flawed process. It may be a very good process. I don't know that. I don't know enough.
That's what I'm telling you now. That's why I spent that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry.
So what I'm conveying here is what I'm hearing from my community, what I'm hearing from some staff people. There are concerns out there about what the process involved. Could have been a better process, could have been a more process. That's what I'm saying. I'm not making a judgment call on the process itself. I'm talking about the image of the process. It may have been the best approach. I don't know. But I do agree with you. more information should be given to the boards, so that when somebody in my community says, why are you only looking at one individual? I don't have to say, hell, I don't even know if we're looking at one. I have no idea what's going on. Well, that puts boards in a very difficult position. People in our community want to know. And when I talk about the person not getting a fair hearing or a fair chance when they come into the position, I'm not necessarily talking about myself as a board member. What I'm talking about is the people within our communities. If they think in some way this process was rigged, or in some way this process wasn't the best process because there was a lack of information, that's how a disservice was done to the individual. Whoever is chosen, I think we all hope they succeed. I hope it is the best person. No one's rooting against the individual. What I'm saying is, when we do anything like this, we have to be very aware of how it looks to the community, especially in light of, if you look at, this is right on the heels of Act 46. And there was quite a controversy about the study committees and how they were set up and what their function actually was.
I think we're getting off topic.
No, we're not.
We need to
We are
stay
not
on.
getting off topic. We are right on topic. The topic is, why is this perception out there? For me, the perception is you had Act 46. The study committee process, people were like, wow, how did the board lose control? Okay, so that was one process. And now we come to this process and the boards again are saying, wow, how did we lose control? That is really bad imagery. And, you know, I think tomorrow after this Act 46 meeting, I'll have some comments there. But I think we have to look at the totality of what we're doing and how it's perceived by the people. I don't know about other communities, I speak to the people I talk to in Vernon, how it's perceived by the folks in Vernon. This is how they look at it. As board chair, when they call me up or they have questions, they have voiced concerns about how this whole thing transpired. And I, for one, was unable to give them any information.
Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate and just remind everybody that the handout that we got, we had over 30 meetings that touched on, that specifically had an agenda item for the superintendent search, and that at the very least, each board was updated 4 times. And in a similar vein, and you're interrupting. So I'm going to play devil's advocate and say boards did have adequate information. And the same thing along the lines with Act 46, being personally involved in that. It is up to boards to be active and to educate themselves for their voters and to participate, not have information, just laid out on a nice little platter for them to, pick and choose from. And maybe that's a bad analogy, but if it is, I apologize. But there is work involved in being a board member, and we have to do it. And in addition to looking at things like the search, at how it was conducted and looking for ways to improve that, we should look internally and at our own individual boards and ask ourselves, are we really advocating and staying on top of topics to that, to benefit our communities? So, Alice?
I think Jill had her hand.
Oh, Jill, okay, sorry, Jill.
So maybe we're calmer in Brattleboro or something. I'm not sure, but I think we felt as a board, I'm sure I'm not overstepping and speaking for all of us, that we felt like we could agree to this process because we knew how the process was going to work. And we got done listening one day and I summed it up this way and they all said, yes, this is what it was. So we're committing to an internal process where there's 3 possible outcomes. 1, the possible outcome is, nope, not a good candidate, go outside.
Yes.
Number 2, maybe, we're not sure, go outside. Or number 3, yes, great candidate, people are really pleased, let's take it to the full board and have a decision. So the Brattleboro board voiced clearly our concerns with only being an internal process and not going external. We heard back the reasons why folks thought that it was a good process to start with, And that at that point, there were these three possible outcomes. And we were not committing ourselves as Brattleboro Town School Board members to saying, yes, definitely, that's the person we're gonna hire. But we were committing ourselves to, let's listen to what happens at the internal process. At the end of this internal process, we felt like, okay, so why would we wanna go outside? Well, one, perception, absolutely. If we're hearing lots of people, and we talked about this, if we're hearing lots of people upset that this was not a good process and that there were not enough candidates that came forward, and that people are unsure about the candidate, then absolutely we would want to send this outside. But that wasn't what we heard. And the folks that were going to be working with this candidate are, I think, I counted up because I don't have all of the information because I wasn't part of the committee, but I did feel informed. I think it's 44 people that were
56.
56.
And 93% gave a rating of 3 or more.
So we felt like if that were, and it wasn't just the folks that were going to be in the central office with the candidate, but rather the administrators, all of the principals, right? So all of the principals, and those are the folks that work really closely with the superintendent. A good cross-section of staff, a good cross-section of central office, a good cross-section of board members from various towns, and who am I missing? And the community, including the police chief, like you had mentioned, Russ, and the folks from United Way, or people that are in our buildings and working with our kids already.
HCRS.
And HCRS. And so we felt like a board that, okay, if at this point we're hearing that this internal candidate flew through with flying colors. And it was a process that didn't say we were going to, we thought about it and we said, well, wait a minute, are we saying, oh, there's nobody else out there and we shouldn't look elsewhere? But this process brought up, like Mark said, from within. And all of those folks who were actually in the room and actually did the interviewing with the candidate were that excited to give a 93% highest possible rating. I think I can speak for all of us in saying we thought we should listen.
Alice?
I don't want to repeat for Putney much of what Jill was saying for Brattleboro board, but I would say that we had a very similar experience. And over the last several months, I have to say, well, I don't know if it's been several months, but we certainly have spent significant time at our board listening to information from our finance rep, Richard and Ron, and have appreciated being so well informed, and obviously been very aware of the incredible amount of meetings the Finance Committee has been having. Many of the members are also, we acknowledged, members of the Act 46 Committee. So the time spent has been significant, and we have appreciated that. The last meeting when we went into executive session, and I think we may have even gone into executive session more than once over the last couple months on this topic, but we were incredibly impressed with the depth of information that was gathered in the opinions. And I will share that our principal was a member of one of these committees and sat in, and was very, not only incredibly impressed with the candidate, but the process. So thank you for all you've done, and we appreciate it.
Michael?
Russ, thanks for your summation about the process and the pros and cons that you gave now, and thank the rest of the board members for sharing how they viewed what was going on. From my point of view, I think we're confusing two different processes, if you will. There's the Finance Committee, it seems, idea or vote or what that happened to allow an internal candidate search to proceed in the way that it did. And then there's the second thing, which is the search. That's how I would view it. And so the process, it seems that the Finance Committee and perhaps the boards took early on is what I have concerns with, because it appears to me that a lot of that happened in executive sessions. And I frankly don't know the rationale for doing that process to decide how you're going to proceed with the superintendent search without naming any candidates, but just the idea of how you're going to proceed, shielded from public view. From where I sit, there's really no reason. And if we go through that list, I think, of the number of meetings, I don't know how many board members could talk about which meetings were open, which meetings were executive session, the reason why it was executive session. And so that's really my concern. And I think maybe echoes Mr. Hebert's concern as well, because it looks like when you go into executive session, there's some reason it can have a perception. I'm not saying that it absolutely looks this way, but it can have a perception to the public that there's something that needs to be hidden. And, we have an open meeting law for the reason that it's supposed to be an open meeting. And I think tonight, you probably gave the greater explanation of why the search was performed the way that it was, but that this whole thing would have benefited from that discussion in an open meeting at the beginning. And so, from where I sit, coming late to the table again, that would be my concern with how this all went down.
It was an open meeting. The process part was an open meeting because I asked about it at the Supervisory Union meeting that was held down in Vernon. And I brought it up during open meeting, and we had the discussion in open meeting in front of the cameras of how the process would be laid out. And in Brattleboro, I know we brought it up other times in open meeting. We went into executive session when we were talking about specific candidates.
So if I could just refer to the list of dates. And I'm looking at section 2, the board meetings. All of the initial discussions at the board level, this was after reviewing it in May with the Finance Committee, was to get insight from each board. So I'm just going to go down the list. Brattleboro Town, June 1st, UHS, June 6th, Vernon, May 31st, Dummerston, June 14th, Guilford, June 30th, Putney Central, May 26th, June 20th, May 26th. All of those were initially, the process was in open session, but we did go into executive session because in the statute refers to the appointment or employment or evaluation of a public officer or employee. And we went into executive session because there was discussion about the potential internal candidate that should be confidential. So all of that happened at each board level to get feedback on, should we start with an internal process? We got positive feedback. That's when the Finance Committee, it would have been June 30th, reviewed the feedback. And again, all of the Finance Committee members were part of those board discussions. Reviewed the feedback with each board on an internal process. So that set forth the internal process. But again, as these memos all state, which were given to each board, the charge of the interview focus group is to thoroughly vet the candidate or candidates and to recommend either to support an internal candidate or to call for a broader search for the successor. So that was still an option. These other dates listed here for each board, those were in open session where this sort of document, this memo, was reviewed by either Frank, myself, or the Finance Committee rep for each board. We were very cautious about not going back into executive session because we didn't have any rationale for that. The last dates on each one of these where it says reviewed feedback, those are all in closed sessions because it was the direct feedback from the 4 focus groups. 56 people rating, and the rating really was related to 1 being the lowest rating, least interested in support for this internal candidate, 3 being most interested in support for this internal candidate, and all of the comments associated with those interviews. And I have to say, those interviews range from more like an hour to an hour and 15 minutes with each focus group. And we do have members of the focus groups, representatives of that group. But just to make the point, that was the sequence in terms of information that was an open session, and then a rationale for the information in executive session.
Dan?
I too want to thank you, Russ. That was a very thoughtful summary. I gained a lot from it, so I appreciate that. It was worth the time. I have, I think, just 3 points that I'll be fairly quick. One of the comments you made, and I need to clarify because I think while it may not be significant in the outcome, I do believe it's material, and I do think the record needs to reflect that it was not that there were 6 boards in favor of this, and if you were told that, you were misled, because the Dummerston board was not in favor of this. And I've read this numerous times, numerous reports, but from the get-go, everyone on the board except for one was not in favor of that. So I just want the record, because it's misleading, and I don't hold this against you, but it's misleading for the public to hear that it's unanimous when it's not. And that's happened a lot in the last year or 18 months with a lot of the discussions we've had on different levels, Act 46 and whatnot. So I just want to clarify that. That's my first point. Second point is something that Ron just made me think of. Absolutely not. That June 14th meeting, from our perspective in Dummerston, was entirely an executive session. We have an audio of when we went in, and so I just want that clarified. It's because there's misinformation, it's mistaken, or unintentional, or I don't care. It's misinformation, and I want it to be clear that people know this. The third point I have is probably the most important, if the first two weren't, is that it's about process. And I went back 3 years. I've only been a voting member of the WSESU for 2 meetings. I went back 3 years to look at the minutes, and I did not see anywhere where this board authorized anything about the search. The only thing I saw was what Jill referenced earlier, where she asked about the process, and this board was told what the process would be. I don't know about the rest of us on this board, but I'm just flabbergasted. This board is responsible. This board authorizes a search. This board directs an executive committee or a finance committee. That didn't happen. I did not see that. If anybody can say that that happened, it's certainly not in the minutes. So talking about process, once again, it's egregious. This board is responsible. Another example is ratifying the warrants. Okay, we've done this for 13 years, but it's just a messed up process. And I don't know if anybody can speak to that, but I can't see how this board has never, how we can be here in this place today if we've never authorized any of this. The superintendent has directed this.
I took that, Dan, as that this board is made up of representatives of each of the smaller, a smaller section of our larger boards. And our larger board definitely had that discussion, and definitely in Brattleboro, we gave the go-ahead. And you're saying in Dummerston, you said no.
But I'm talking about the authorization of the search to begin with.
That's what I'm talking
How the
about.
finance committee was selected to do this.
We knew that.
This board should vote on
Yeah.
that. As a matter of procedure, this board should be voting for everything that is under the auspice of this board.
I don't know whether it's a should or shouldn't, but I took it as actually a positive thing, that this board, that's only made up of a couple members of each of the other boards, did not make that decision, but rather took all of us in our Brattleboro board, that we all voted on that instead of just a few of us.
My understanding is this board's responsible for hiring, evaluating, and contract negotiations, not the individual districts. The superintendent is employed by WSESU, correct? Not employed by Dummerston, not employed by Brattleboro. So that's my point. I don't want to argue about it. I just want that out there so that people on this board can hear that point. That's how I feel, and I'm those are my points, thank you.
And again, I'm going to play devil's advocate. The vote on the process came at the feedback level, so it came on October 11th. That's when the Dummerston Board
That's not
made the
what I was
motion.
referring to. I was referring to about our June 14th meeting.
Okay, I'm talking about your point about that Dummerston didn't support the process.
That's right. June 14th, we didn't.
That's not correct.
I have it on tape if you'd like to hear it.
I would like to hear that.
Great.
So the motion, the actual motion was made, I believe, on October 11th.
We did it twice. We did it once in executive session and one outside of executive session.
Okay. So that last, the one that was actually done, we can't make motions in executive session.
It was a consensus, it wasn't a vote.
Okay.
And there's no point in arguing about this.
I'm not arguing, I'm having a discussion. I don't know about you, but, so I'm just trying to clarify for the record that the Dummerston vote not supporting the process did happen on October 11th when we went through the feedback. Is that correct? I don't have my notes with me.
There was a vote on that date.
Okay, great.
Now, on the June 14th date, when we were presented with this and we were being asked for feedback about the process in executive session, which shouldn't have been an executive session, and I admit that I and no other board member brought that up, and we should have, but we were remiss. But we did talk about it, we went around, and the consensus, other than one person, was that we did not support the process, and Ron said he would take that to the finance committee.
Amy, we just had an interesting discussion at the Brattleboro meeting this last time about open session and what is not open session and all of that. And actually, David Scholes had asked for Bob Fisher to talk about what should be an open session or not. And his legal opinion on it was that the whole process part could be put under the open or the executive session if you read it that way. He said an argument could be made the other way as well. So just to your point of you feel you're remiss in saying that it should have been in open session. Yeah, it could have been, but to say that it's definitely wrong that it should not have been.
I didn't say that, I said I was remiss.
Right.
And again, my bigger point was about what happened, not.
Right, but I'm just pointing out that I personally found that all to be interesting and good information to know.
I do too.
That there are two views of that from a legal perspective of the fact that it could, the process, definitely the part of discussing one particular candidate should be in executive session. But even the process, because of the size of the town and the discussion and the fact that it would be easy for people to quickly come to a conclusion of who the candidate was, he felt that that too could be argued that even the process should have been done always in executive session, which it was not done for us, at least in Brattleboro, always in executive session.
Okay. So do we have any? Yes, Sandra.
I'd just like to clarify that I remember the first meeting that we discussed this in executive session, and I expressed concern. And I totally agree with Mark about trying to develop people within and teachers, you know, working with them and professional development and having them come up through the system, I think is wonderful, and it's great when it works. But when we were presented with this, and I remember people asking, are there people interested, or is there only one candidate, and it looked like it was only one, and I definitely felt like that was a concern, that you can't make a choice when you are only funneling your energy into one candidate, in my opinion. So it was said that we all had positive feedback. I didn't have negative feedback, but I did express strong concern about it.
Anybody else have any thoughts or comments they want to share? Yes, Ruth.
Okay, I'll say right up front that I am philosophically opposed to internal searches. But I guess my question is, how many qualified people who are certified to be superintendents, are there employed in the SU? Round figures, I don't need.
Probably 5.
How many?
5.
Only 5.
They're typically principals or central office administrators.
Well, I would hope that when we were hiring for such an important position, that we would have at least 5 candidates to interview. And if you only have 5 people in the whole supervisory union who are qualified, you certainly should have gone for an external process, in my opinion. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay. So I would entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Public.
Oh, I'm sorry, public comment, yes, I'm sorry. Okay, so we'll go to the public comment portion of the meeting, and again, we'll allow each person a turn, and then if you can limit it to a couple of minutes, that would be great. And then once you've spoken, if we can let the other people have their turn, and then if you have additional stuff to say, then we can go back to you. But just to try and be fair to everybody so that they have opportunities to speak. But we start on, oh, all right, we'll start with you. And if you could say your name and...
I live in Brattleboro. I wish I had as much time as Russ and the others to speak, because I'd like to answer almost everything. But I'd like to try to just to focus. As a lot of you know, I've been involved in town affairs for many years. I've been involved in the hiring of a town manager or a planning director. I've been involved with hiring elsewhere. My experience has always been that the hiring process itself is one of the most illuminating of experiences, because your candidates are coming in with such an enormous breadth and depth of experience that I find myself learning about things that I never even knew existed. I found that when I had my year on the select board here in Brattleboro, I thought our finance director knew an awful lot about finances. And a few years later, I was the chair of the finance committee, and I was working with John Weisenberg, and felt like I had been promoted from the rookie league to the major leagues. I just didn't even know what a finance director could know, because I'm just a small town guy. And I found the same thing. We had the experience when choosing a planning director here in Brattleboro. We ended up with 2 candidates at the end that were split right down the. Now, I won't go into why we went with one or the other, but one was an older guy who was retiring from what was essentially the equivalent of the planning commission over in Boston. And as I sat there for an hour listening to him talk, and I had been on the planning commission here for 6 years, of which for the last 2 I was the chair. And I always read every trade magazine that there was and read books and thought I knew a little bit about it. And as I sat there listening to this guy talk, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, because I knew nothing about planning. You know, I think because I've enjoyed art all my life, and looked at it and read about it and studied about it and done a little bit myself, I knew art. But when I went to Europe and stood in front of a Rembrandt or a Michelangelo sculpture, again, you don't know whether to laugh or cry. You feel like, whoa, I didn't know anything about it. How could I even possibly know what I was looking for, until I began to see all and hear and all of this other people and other things happening all around the world. It is not, you almost make it sound as if you opened up the hiring to the whole nation, that you could not. You were somehow then unable to choose in the end somebody local. But that's not true. But I guarantee you, right now, You open it up again and look at everybody that applies, and then re-rank everybody. You will find that local candidates that you may not have ranked, that you may now have ranked at 70 or 80 out of your 100, all of a sudden is now a 30 or a 40, because you have nothing to compare to. And I think you do the school district a great disservice by not looking everywhere that you can.
Thank you. Anybody else? Jody?
Jody Normando from Jefferson. I'm beginning to wonder why I'm even here tonight, because it sounds like a done deal. It's been a done deal for a year and a half as far as a member of the public, like I am, is concerned. I was very glad to hear Russ talk. He spoke very, I think, from his heart about what was going on here and how the process had gone. But as a member of the public, it has not gone that way for me and for many other people. I consider myself a very knowledgeable person and educated myself on the boards and what's been going on in town. So mainly because of Act 46, I have watched many of the videos of the towns, and the same thing happened with executive sessions from one town to another. Anything that was filmed. I've also been at the Dummerston meetings and seen it, and it has been an executive session. Not an awful lot has been out in the open. The public doesn't even know that the superintendent's retiring until this just came into the press. And he made the announcement to the boards 2 years ago that he was going to be stepping down at the end of the time. So, I'm thinking, why bother here today? And a lot of what I want to say has been said, but I'm going to say it again. I'm a process person. I like to see the process work. I like to see a good process. I also like to see boards do the right thing. And in my mind, and others that I've talked to, this search has not been a process, but an orchestration. And it's been run by administration. It's not been run by the community or our boards. I think we may have a good candidate in-house. We may have a very good candidate in the house. However, as a Green Street School student, I was taught that there are the 3 words: good, better, best. You can have 1 good candidate, you can have 2 better candidates, you can have more than 2 best candidates. And we're calling this the best candidate without any kind of comparison. And this candidate may be the best candidate, but you need comparisons in order to make the best candidate. The town of Brattleboro, as Spoon said, they knew this. They had a good internal candidate for the, what do you call him? The town manager, thank you. They had a good candidate internal, but they chose to go outside, and now we have a good, excellent town manager. The Boys and Girls Club had an internal candidate, but they spent 5 months looking elsewhere. They came back to their internal candidate. So that makes, and he's a board member, Ricky Davidson, he's got to feel really good about being chosen after it's been outside. So you can't have a best candidate unless you have comparisons. Ron, the administration will tell you that it's the best for a known person to carry on what we have, and Russ said the same thing. Maybe it is. It could be. I can see the benefits of that. Or maybe after 14 years, maybe it's a good idea to have some fresh ideas and some fresh blood to bring into the system. I don't know. We don't know unless we can compare them. We haven't looked and we haven't asked. So I'm here to ask the WSESU board to open up the process. We have time. Ron's not leaving until June of next year. And originally this candidate, we were going to be presenting a candidate in March. We're now doing it now. We have time to do that. I would encourage you to do that. I've heard from many people that this process should be open. What concerns me is many of them are teachers or substitutes. They don't feel comfortable speaking out, talking to anybody. They're afraid of their job. They're going to keep quiet. They're not going to come to the meetings. I have nothing to lose. They're not going to come to the meetings. They're not going to tell you how they feel because they're afraid that they're going to lose their jobs. And I'm sorry that they feel that way. Sometimes I think teachers aren't asked, or I can't think of the term, but I don't think we ask our teachers enough. We don't be inclusive of our teachers enough. And I think that environment makes it so that they don't feel that they can come and talk to us. And yesterday I talked to somebody who Ron called and asked to be on a committee. I've been involved in education for a long, long time, on the outskirts and on the in, and I've never seen an advertisement out that, okay, we're looking for people for focus groups, we're looking for community members, we're looking for that. How does somebody know that you're looking for a focus group? Not that I would have applied, but it would have been nice to know that you could apply. Our parents and teachers, et cetera.
So Jody, you're way over the time limit.
Well, I've got one more
Okay.
sentence, Amy.
Yep.
So I'm asking you to please take in your deliberations what I and others are saying and open up the process so we can be sure we have the best candidate to handle all the next few years they're going to throw at us, and we are going to get a bunch of stuff thrown at us. And, for the sake of our children and for their education, I ask you to consider this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just see? Jody, I'm not going to go point by point because I think I've responded to a lot of those things, but I think that you highlight the difficulty of the decision and the two sides. And the only thing that I'll sort of take here is that it's a done deal or it's orchestrated. What you're saying and what others are saying is really important, and that when this board, and you've heard just from the board, that if this is an orchestrated board, we're not doing a really good job. And that's good that there are different opinions on here. So that what is being will be considered in the executive session of how to act on our recommendation. What you're saying is being heard and will be considered. We'll do one side, or we'll take one approach or the other. Either approach that we take, there will be some really disappointed people, and I don't mean just people around this table. We can take it, but it's people that are involved and invested one way or the other. If we go forward, you'll be disappointed. Again, I hope that you give the person a chance and see how they perform. If we decided to open it up again, there will be some incredibly disappointed people. Again, not around here, but people that we've heard from who think that the process is, and Michael makes a good distinction of the two different processes, has been a good process. So we've got a tough job to do. And
What
I
you
appreciate
saw is
it.
a good process. I, as a member of the public, did not. And, so.
No, I know that.
respect
I know
your
that
views.
we disagree on that.
Okay.
And I understand the pros and cons of it.
So Andy Davis is next.
Thank you. I'm really glad that this discussion is taking place. It's inspiring. I got involved at a Brattleboro Town School Board meeting in September this year, primarily because I was trying to get more involved in what was happening with Act 46. I'm a town meeting representative. I am also a town school employee. And it does bother me, Jody's remarks about people not feeling comfortable to stand up. I know that Vermont has a number of principles for professional educators, and one of them is advocacy. And I don't feel afraid for my job. I feel like if you want to look at me as a teacher, fine. I'm following one of the Vermont guidelines for professional educators to get involved in public policy of education. But I primarily here as a town meeting rep because I think this is an issue that's going to really affect how people perceive the district as we move toward Act 46. I think it would be much better if people had total confidence in the process leading to leadership. And I think it's going to lead to more skepticism as the Act 46 people try to move that forward. I think the proof is in the pudding. As I move around town, the public is not confident in this process and asks questions and expresses surprise. And I've been surprised. Along this step, I've a couple of times thought, I'm just going to leave this issue. And I get into conversation with somebody, and I'm pulled back into it because of the reaction that people have to it. So I did make a couple of just points here, and I'll be very quick with them, because I know it's a long meeting. One of the number one things that comes up, and with all due respect to Dr. Stahley, who's put in a huge amount of effort in this supervisory union, people ask, why is the current superintendent so deeply involved in this process? To the point when I first brought it up at a Brattleboro Town School Board meeting, the only answer I got, the only person who spoke to it was Dr. Stahley. The perception is that that is not standard. Maybe it is, but a lot of people would like to see separation between the outgoing administration and the incoming administration. The second one, looking historically at our district, and maybe no one has an answer for this, has an internal search produced any of our previous superintendents in the last 20 years? I don't know if you were an internal candidate, Dr. Stahley. I don't know if you were in a competitive search. I don't know if you were an inside person. I don't know that. I'm curious to find that out. The statistic has been put out as a reason for this, the 30% turnover rate among Vermont school superintendents. Well, at a 30% average turnover, that means an average leader, if my math is right, stays less than 4 years. And I think, we've had great service from our current superintendent for all those years. But we may be looking at a candidate who won't be staying any longer than that anyway. So I'm not sure what we're aiming. When I first raised this issue at the Brattleboro Town School Board, I was told to not say the very first thing, and I believe it was Jill, when you said, well, don't say just an internal search, because this process includes the option of moving to an external search. I don't feel like that was really a completely forthright answer, because I don't see any evidence that that move to the external search is really being considered. It feels to me like this is sort of like that train in New Jersey pulling into the station without the brakes on. That's what I'm just saying that's what it feels like.
Should have been here for the first hour and a half of our discussions. You would have heard all things public.
I have a prior commitment. I downloaded everything.
No, I mean tonight. You would hear right now very clearly.
Well, I went to the Finance Committee, Jill, and I heard, I think, almost a very similar presentation from Russ at the last Finance Committee meeting when I was there with several other people, my wife included, and I think we heard the rationale. And I had a prior commitment actually to our school system tonight, which I fulfilled. I thought about canceling it, but I decided to fulfill my responsibility there. The last point I would like to make with this is a question. Will you consider this same process for future searches? Or will you reconsider this process and the next time, which could happen in well under 10 years, with Russ, would you consider following this same roadmap that we've done this time, or are you considering modifying it? You expressed some admission that things hadn't gone exactly as maybe they should have at that Finance Committee meeting, I believe on the 18th, at the Cusick meeting room. I'm just curious, would you follow the same path again?
Russ,
Sure.
actually, a question should be directed to the chair. So,
are you the chair?
I am the chair, yes.
Could you,
Yes, Russ,
I can answer.
Russ.
could you as a member of the board as
Yeah.
part of this process?
No, but Russ, yeah.
Mrs. Wall would be following again.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, and I know you had other commitments and that you would have liked to have been here for the whole thing. And what I said tonight is a lot different and more long-term than what you heard at the Finance Committee meeting, where I went through a lot of those a lot of those questions about the choices and the benefits of outside and the benefits of inside. And so I won't repeat all that. But in answer to your specific question, we look at it each time as to what's going on. Part of what we were talking about was the critical nature of timing of what's happening now. And some people would say, and you might argue, that, boy, because of what's happening now, it's even more important to go outside. Our view, and it was a unanimous view on the Finance Committee, representing all the different boards, that those things spoke to, looking at an internal candidate first, because in part because of the urgency of time and because of startup time for somebody coming in. Now, when you're saying that, and we've heard it tonight in other places, that it's a done deal and it's not going to be considered, we're considering it now, and we will consider of whether to reopen. That is, the Finance Committee has recommended that we don't reopen. But we're 6 members. There are 18 members here. I guarantee you, if nobody else brings it up, I will bring it up. That's a really important question of whether to open it up again. And when we went into the process, we knew that was a possibility. So we did talk about setting a bar really very high of what it is that would keep us from going to an open search, because there are benefits to an open search, there's no question about it, but there are benefits to an internal search, which I think I elaborated more tonight than I did at the meeting that you were at. So, if it comes up, if that candidate, disappears, in a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and, I argue that knowing the community and knowing what they would be getting into means that they have that longer-term commitment, and that there's a higher certainty of that happening. I mean, you can't predict anything with certainty. That person we've got that opportunity. If there's time where things are less time urgent, that's a factor to go in. It's balancing, and we take a look at those things. Is it settled? Are other places, sort of at the same level that our high-functioning union is, so that there are, the potential benefits of going outside are bigger. So you're looking at the benefits, you're looking at the cost. So I can't answer of whether we do this again or not. I don't know, and that's you have to take a look at the specifics of the circumstance when it comes up. And make that balance. I mean, I hope I'm not on the board at that point, not because I don't enjoy my board experience, but I hope that that's going to be in another 10, 15 years, and that'll be more than enough for me. But but it's a good point, and it's a question that has to be addressed each time. And I think that's important, that each time you have to take a look at this situation. There's some blanket rules of going outside because of things that you can learn and those sorts of, but then you have to balance it with other things. I mean, I wish life were filled with really easy choices, but they're not easy choices, and that's why we're all here, and that's why this discussion is here, because it's not a no-brainer of a decision to make. I imagine at least in the executive session, we'll be hearing more on the other side. I mean, I encourage people we have had people around the table talking about the merits and the openness and the strength of the process that we do take. So I hope I'm responsive to your concerns.
I'm Peggy Maxfield, and I teach at BAMS, and I have the privilege of being on the search committee for Ron. I'm not sure who else, a long time ago. And so as you consider the process, one of the highlights I just want to say is that over 25 faculty and staff had an opportunity to provide feedback. During Ron's search committee, I sat in the group with Mike and with one other teacher. So I see that as a huge positive in this process. And as you consider any potential changes coming forward, I would certainly hope that the idea of including teachers' voice in that number list would be continued. Thanks.
Any other public comments? Oh, yes. Sorry. Yep.
Mr. Fred Bruning had to leave early. He had another meeting, so he asked me to read a statement for him. This statement is from Fred Bruning, a resident and tax-paying property owner in the town of Brattleboro. He has lived in Windham County for 41 years and the last 11 and the first 2 of those in Brattleboro. His children both attended WSESU schools from K through 12. He said he is disappointed that he learned very late in the game about what was going on in the selection process for the new superintendent. It was really only a couple of weeks ago. As a small bit of background, he wanted to say that he managed the search process last winter for an executive director for an albeit much smaller public organization, but felt it very important to cast the net wide, even though they ended up hiring someone from the current staff. He wanted to make 2 points, and here I will read as if he were speaking. First, I assume or at least hope that the process that happened over the last year or so was legal. But while that may have been the case in a strict sense, I seriously question whether it was best practice to look at such a small pool of candidates for such an important position. And it is best practice for an outgoing public leader to manage the process, and is it best practice for an outgoing public leader to manage the process for choosing a successor? I don't think so. The search committee I chaired wanted absolutely no contact with the previous executive director. I feel in this case, best practice would have been having a search committee like ours that was independent of influence from any quarter. Secondly, I feel it is also unfair to the candidate who has been chosen to not be able to prove that they are in fact the best person that could have been found for the job by competing with others from outside of the WSESU. I understand that everyone is very supportive of the decision, and that is great, but I also feel that the people of the district were not served well. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
I'll speak. My name is Hannah. I'm a parent of 2 children in the district. Also joining late in the game, but and I think probably there are a lot of parents that don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. I'd like to be more involved. I also have concern for the process, the lack of transparency, but more about the process and it being an internal search versus an external search. And I'll just share a short story about my family. We lived in Brattleboro for 8 or 9 years, and then we moved away 2 years ago for career. And when we were in Brattleboro, we thought that the schools were pretty good. We had a child with severe special needs, and we were pretty happy with the program that he was in. We thought it was probably the best that he could get in this area. And until we moved to another state and we saw how things can be done differently. And there are some things that maybe it's not better, but maybe sometimes different. We can add to his program. He can grow, he can advance more from learning how other school districts do it. And so we came back with that knowledge and saying, okay, well, Brattleboro is pretty good, but it can be better. And that's what I worry, that we're going to miss that opportunity to find a better candidate. I feel like we have more to lose keeping it an internal search. And there are way more benefits to expanding that, and so thank you for listening and keeping this open to us.
Any additional comments? Okay. I would entertain a motion to go into executive session for discussion of the appointment or employment or evaluation of a public officer or employee, to consider the Finance Committee's recommendation to hire the internal candidate for the position of WSESU Superintendent. And also we would like to include any school board members who might be in the audience, focus group representatives, so that they can participate and provide feedback directly to the SU board and SU staff.
So moved.
Oh, good job, Ruth.
Second.
Who seconded? Richard, okay.
And that would include Frank, but not
Yes.
Ron.
Not me.
Right, not Ron, yeah. Yeah, so, okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor of going into executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. We have arisen from executive session, and The last item on our agenda is possible action regarding this the SU Finance Committee's recommendation.
So I would like to move that this committee accept the Finance Committee's recommendation to hire the internal candidate for the position of the WSESU Superintendent.
And I will second it.
Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Should we do a one-by-one vote rather than voice, or what are people comfortable with? One by one? Okay. We'll start over there. Mike?
No.
No.
Yes.
Oop, hang on.
Yes.
Hang on, I'm sorry. Walter. Walter was a yes, and then, no, okay, sorry. I'm looking at the wrong list.
That was a yes.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm typing.
It's your name.
I know. But I need to get everybody else's.
Okay, that's cool.
Slow it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your own name.
Kim, yes.
Yes.
Okay. Amy Wall, yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Hold on, we gotta catch up.
I got it.
Where are we at?
Where, Michael, he said no. Right.
Yes.
Wait, Dan,
Dan, no, okay.
All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Oops, I missed a couple.
Madam Chair, may I explain my vote?
Sure.
I made the vote of no because of the process and the optics of the process and community feedback I received. And it should not be interpreted as a vote against a particular candidate. It was a process vote.
Madam Chair, I would like to say the exact same thing that Mr. Hebert said, that those are my reasons as well.
Okay.
They're mine as well.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I might also explain my vote as a yes, but I feel that we had a process that may have caused some folks some concern, that I'm gratified to be part of a group that has listened so hard to the public and struggled, as it's evident at 10:24 at night with this decision and listening. And I thank all of those here in this room and those, how many, 56 people that met with the candidate?
Yep, 56.
For their very candid comments and their very strong support for this candidate that helped me at least lead to this decision.
Okay. So Jill, or Kim, you can hopefully verify this, but I had 13 yes and 5 no.
Correct.
Okay. So the motion passes.
I make a motion, we adjourn?
Second that motion.
Could I just ask,
So who made that? Jill, you motion? Who wants a second?
I did.
Okay. All those in favor of adjournment?